Let's get more now on that final draft agreement for tackling climate change, which has been presented to delegates at a UN summit in Paris. It proposes a legally binding agreement to limit global warming to no more than 2 degrees Celsius. With me now is Alice Bowes-Larkin, Professor of Climate Science and Energy Policy at the University of Manchester, and Tom Burke, who's Chairman of the environmental think tank E3G. Very good to see you. Yeah. Just your reactions first, Tom.
I think this is, as Fabius was describing, this is really a historic agreement. It's the first time we've really got all the countries in the world who've committed themselves to, in a sense, getting out of carbon fuels and getting into low carbon fuels. And I think that, as a political exercise, has been really quite extraordinary triumph of diplomacy for the French.
I mean, the principle you obviously agree with.
I think it's, again, I would repeat, it's a historic moment. It's really interesting to see this reference to 1.5 degrees as well as 2 degrees, and indeed wording around the likes of well below 2 degrees. So that's extremely significant, and it sends a very strong signal. But I think what's important is that we also, now scrutinise the science and make sure that what we need to do to achieve that can match up.
Now, can I put a couple of specific points about that? For instance, 1.5 degrees, climate scientists have said that's great. Having a review every 5 years, I mean, some people think that's too late. You need a review every couple of years because we're so close to 1.5 degrees anyway. Yeah,
that gives us a very limited carbon budget, which means that we need to pay attention to the direction of travel of emissions very regularly. So even if perhaps it's not in the text that we have to address this every 5 years, I think individual nations, because they will no doubtedly come up with policies to try to address this goal, will need to scrutinise those on an annual basis, just like the UK does with its Climate Change Act. It has a review every year.
We need to get on with it. In other words, the earlier the better is the
I think that's theme. Exactly right. We do need to get on with it. We have no time left at all. But we mustn't only look to governments to act. What's been really interesting about what's gone on Paris is the way the cities have been there in large numbers talking about what they're going to do. And you've also beginning to see really now emerging in a very significant sense the opportunity-seeking businesses, the Elon Musks of the world with battery storage, people building electric vehicles, the people who are beginning to make the renewable technologies in huge quantities now, and the bankers following them beginning to invest in it, Goldman Sachs, Citi, Deutsche Bank, all committing now large sums of money to actually drive this forward.
I wonder how important that is because the science has been ahead of the politicians. The politics is very, very difficult. But one of the problems with green policies in general is a lot of members of the public think it's hair shirt. You can't do this. You can't go to Spain on your holiday. You mustn't drive your car. And obviously people don't want to change their lifestyle that much, do they?
They don't, but we also have to pay attention to what the science is telling us in terms of these very limited budgets. So we need incredible innovation in terms of technology. We need to be deploying that technology much, much faster than we're already doing. But we also need to consider how we use energy, using energy appropriately. And those of us who use the most energy need to look at, the appropriateness of that and whether or not there's an opportunity on the demand side, which is largely been not discussed, in this debate, particularly around the Paris Agreement. So we focused a lot on technology, renewable energy, low carbon supply, but there's a big story on energy efficiency, on energy demand.
I was talking to a climate change scientist a little earlier who said that, effectively, instead of getting frequent flyer miles, you should have frequent flyer penalties, and that people should, those are kind of things that governments at least could consider.
Frankly, I think that's the wrong approach to this. And you're right to point out there may be changes in lifestyle, but what we're actually seeing already are forced changes in lifestyle because the climate's changing. We've seen that. That's what we've seen in the small island states. But actually, we're getting a preview of that in what's happening up in Cumbria. It's a change in lifestyle. That's what climate change means.
And there are those who think we're getting a preview of it in migration. That mass migration is going to be the next 25 years of our future.
Clear evidence that there was a strong climate component in the forces that drove to the events in Syria.
Can I ask one other specific point? $100 billion for climate financing by 2020, which sounds huge. Is that a big number?
I personally don't think it's a big number. I'm not, an expert on the economic side of this. The damages, the reparation, the help with mitigation, we need to help countries to leapfrog technology, so to bring in technologies, low carbon technologies, much quicker than they would be able to do with their own finances. So, I think that we need to look beyond that figure. They've said that this is a starting point. We really need to go well beyond that.
Where are you on that, Tom?
I think that's right, but I think you've got to understand this is 100 billion not just from governments, but increasingly from flows of private capital. And I think what's very interesting for me is the contribution Mark Carney made with his speech about climate change being a threat to the whole financial system, because as investors pay attention to that, they're going to want to be investing more and more in a low carbon economy, which lowers that risk.
Do either of you think this is the end of coal? I mean, not the end tomorrow, but the beginning of the end for coal in particular?
I think ultimately, if these goals hold, if we achieve a well below 2-degree target, then I think that we need to be leaving some fossil fuels in the ground. You know, the assessments would be that without a technology such as carbon capture and storage, which is where you capture the carbon from the coal-fired power station, very soon we will need to be phasing out coal. It's a very high carbon fuel, and with the goals such as 1.5 degrees, well below 2 degrees, you know, there isn't room for fossil fuel in you know, beyond 2050, in my view.
I think the market's already made its mind up. It's not going to invest in any significant extent in coal, and the only place you're going to see investors investing in coal is when governments do it for actually largely industrial or local political reasons.
And is there any technology that you can foresee that could save us without the pain? In other words, do we actually have to go through some of these changes? Where's the silver bullet?
There isn't one, but we've got all the technologies we need now to solve the problem, and we're going to get more. And the most significant one, the one to pay most attention to in coming years, is battery storage, is the way in which we're going to get electric vehicles and going to make our grids
That's the Elon Musk very fancy sports car that goes very, very fast on a big battery.
But also the $5 billion investment that he's made in building a plant in Nevada to make batteries, to make sophisticated smart batteries, and are going to cut the costs very fast. We're coming down far faster than even the IEA was predicting 2 years ago in the costs of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Tom said, that a lot of these technologies already exist, but it's also how we use these technologies. So we're not just talking about future technologies. You know, how do we use our internal combustion engine in the car? You know, how far are we driving? How are we accelerating? I know these things sound minor, but the demand side needs to be addressed as well as the supply side, so the technology as well as how we use it. And I think if we can really start to scrutinise, you know, some positive scenarios around how we can reduce energy demand, that will make decarbonisation easier, because the less energy we have, the easier it is to decarbonise.
And that will be software as much as it will be hardware. It's how do you manage our generating system more cleverly, more cheaply, more reliably, not just how do you build an interesting new piece of technology.
Tom, Alice, thanks very much for your perspectives on this. Thank you.